Donnie and Dolly. The team is supported by ableauctions.ca. Closing your business? We can help.
All of our guests today, including John Shannon, standing by, are brought to you by our friends at Passant Motors. Purchase a vehicle at Passant Motors this month, and they pay your GST. Also, did you know you can get a car with zero down payment? Get all the details at PassantMotors.com. Canucks losing to Calgary 5-2 last night. Canucks host Seattle on Saturday, San Jose on Monday. And with that, we bring in NHL analyst John Shannon. John, thanks for doing this, sir. How are you?
I am great, boys. Happy Friday.
Yeah, same to you. Hey, John, the Canucks lose last night, and there's a lot of cushion with the fan base given the start that they had. 5 games in 8 days for the Canucks, multiple time zones. You've been around for a while, just like me, just like Rick. Can teams, with the way they travel now, still use travel as an excuse?
Oh, I think so. I think it's a factor. It's always going to be a factor. Time zones are time zones. That part hasn't changed. The fact that they're on luxurious charter airlines and get fed until they're full is another story. But I think that the wear and tear on a player's body is still the same as it was. You're not sitting in O'Hare Airport for 3 hours anymore, Donnie. But there are times where you get on the airplane and after a game, if you're doing a back-to-back and you get to Calgary and then you can't get to sleep. And there are lots of different discussions about how that worked. Remember how Mike Gillis and his boys, went to the sleep doctor system, and that has not changed in the NHL as long as I've been around, and I don't see how it's going to change unless there's some sort of time warp, and that's only guys like Rick can invent time warps.
I can't speak for Rick, but I know you and I have both traveled with NHL teams or following NHL teams. How would you compare travel now versus back in the day?
Easy. Travel is easy. It is rather high, first class. I can tell you from the teams that I covered, including the Canucks, before they had their plane, that we would sit in airports for 3 to 4 hours waiting for connections. And don't laugh, Donnie, and I think you'd probably endorse this too. That's when you got to know the players. Yeah. That's when you actually had time to sit down and share a coffee, and they weren't hidden away in the parking garage or in the dressing room. They were with the rest of us. And and let's face it, all the rookies got middle seats. So it was one of those things that was and at our age, I mean, those guys are still all our friends because of the time we spent at airports and transporting and on buses with them. So that was a cool part of the game. And when you tell people those stories, they can't
believe it. No, absolutely. Flying commercial, just like normal folk back in the day.
Normal people. Yeah. Absolutely, John. John, the Canucks start unbelievable despite the loss last night. When you talk to people around the league, how impressed are they about the Canucks?
I think that it's one of the top 3 stories in the NHL. And I think you saw that when you see that TNT's in town on Wednesday night for the Islander game, that Wayne Gretzky's sitting on the desk in Atlanta talking about how good the Canucks have been and how great Quinn Hughes has been. I think there is a lot of acknowledgement that way. The frustration for that, Rick, is if this, and I'm not going to count last night, but if this team laid an egg, it was on national television on a Saturday night at Scotiabank Arena in Toronto. And in fact, our old pal Dave Hodge and I, we had this discussion on our show. Would the Canucks have sacrificed the win in Ottawa and the win in Montreal just to win in Toronto? I didn't think so. But I'll tell you what, I'm sure there were some frustrated fans because when you're on the national stage, you're in a big market like Toronto, you want your players to be at their best, and that night they weren't.
John, I know you know television and big events in Canada. The Grey Cup is this weekend, huge numbers. And I still am I miss Don Whitman and the Grey Cup call. Pat Marsden, Ernie Afaganis. Donnie and I go back to Ernie Afaganis, Chris Cuthbert. So many great Canadian broadcasters over the years did the Grey Cup. But this is a big event. It's always going to get big numbers, and it has not stopped getting big numbers in this country.
No, and the frustration, I think, for those of us that love the CFL is that, and this happens when I go west, is that the CFL is elevated back to where we all thought it should be. And in Hamilton, it's where it should be. But there are some issues in Southern Ontario. Sure, the Argos got 26,000 for the Eastern Final, but they laid an egg.
Yeah.
The market has, for one reason or another, felt it's outgrown the CFL. I don't believe that. I still think there are hundreds of thousands of Canadian football fans in Southern Ontario. But it is not a difficult thing or not an easy thing to go to the stadium at times. But I think they're in a good spot. If the Argos could have ever gotten over that absolute debacle last Sunday, or Saturday rather, it would have been a great Grey Cup, Winnipeg and Toronto. By the way, the CFL going back to Saturdays is a brilliant move for their playoff games.
Yeah.
That was really smart. And a lot of that started with the Lions, who were really adamant that they wanted those 4 o'clock Pacific time starts on Saturday afternoon. And it has worked out very well for the team, it worked well for the league, and it worked well for the network.
Yeah, I'm a fan. And anybody with kids or anybody who lives far away from BC Place would agree. John, I believe you've been talking about this on the Bob McCown podcast, and I believe that he's been hanging out in Toronto. But Patrick Kane, where's he going to end up?
Great question. So, I'll do the mea culpa here. I was told on Monday at the Hall of Fame night that Kane was going to meet with the Maple Leafs on Tuesday. That, in fact, did not happen. But he is certainly on a list that Leafs are certainly on that list of teams. But I think you have to look at the 2 teams in Florida, Carolina, who are struggling at the moment and need a goal scorer, and don't rule out Tom Gallardi's Dallas Stars. I think that Dallas is one of those teams that always is looking to improve. They've got some star players that could probably use some help and some leadership from a Patrick Kane. And, oh, by the way, you know what? There is Buffalo. But I think Buffalo has to be better. I think Buffalo has to prove that it can be a playoff team before Patrick Kane would commit to play for the Sabres.
His hometown. John, thanks for this. We'll talk to you next week.
Have a great day, guys. Have a good weekend.